And welcome back. According to a New York Times article published last week, the effects of human-induced climate change are being felt in every corner of the United States. Scientists reported last Tuesday with water growing scarcer in dry regions, torrential rains increasing in wet regions, heat waves becoming more common and more severe. Our next guest has a lot to say about the growing topic. Some of it can be found in her latest blogs on Burn Your Stencils. We now welcome Cindy Trinh to the show, and good to have you.
Thank you for having me again.
So here we are talking about climate change, and when we look around, we see winter lasts a little bit longer. Everybody's wondering whether or not summer is actually going to be able to kick in, and anybody who is somebody really has questions about this. So this discussion is going on, so bring us up to speed a little bit.
Yeah, climate change is real and it's happening now. We're seeing the effects right now, and 97% of the scientific community all agree that man-made climate change is happening and we're seeing the effects. Drought, hurricanes, storms, allergy season, people suffering from allergies that never even had allergies before.
Right.
We're seeing the long winter that we had. This summer is supposed to be a scorcher. I mean, we're hearing all these different news about extreme weather patterns, and Hurricane Sandy is the best example in point. Hurricane Sandy ravaged our city, and New York City is not built for a hurricane because we don't get hurricanes. Right. And the fact that this hurricane came in and ruined so much of our city, we're still recovering. I mean, we ride the subway, right? Like we're still recovering from this terrible storm. And I think it's starting to directly affect people's lives. And when it starts to directly affect people's lives, that's when people wake up. And that's when people say, you know what, this is a problem and it's actually hurting me right now. And I need to wake up and we need to do something about this. So many people lost their homes in Sandy. Mm-hmm. And that is a direct effect of climate change. And people are now realizing this. So I think what people want to do now is to get together and really address this issue, bring it forth to our political leaders, and demand that they do something about it.
I want to go there because, former Vice President Al Gore was one of the original people who started talking about climate change and green and the earth and really addressing it. It really was one of the vocal people about it. Right. A lot of people said, oh gosh, he's off on some crazy tangent. They don't give him any credit whatsoever. Nowadays, he almost looks like a genius because the things that are actually being faced, and somebody out of Washington really addressing it and going forward and gung-ho. Question now is Congress going to address this, given the fact that you said it affects so many people's lives? Are we going to see an address by Congress of the whole climate change issue?
Well, we've been seeing so many failures on the part of Congress to address this issue, and it baffles me because I think climate change is one of the most important issues facing the American people today. It affects every single living being on this planet, not just humans, but animals, plants, and other life on this planet. It affects everyone. So it should be on the very top priority list, but Congress has really made it on the very bottom. And that's because of certain political leaders that continue to deny the science behind climate change. And it's like denying that the sky is blue. I mean, this is a fact. This is truth. Why are we even debating the existence of climate change to begin with? We should be debating on how to combat it, not the fact that it even exists, that we even have climate change. It is true. We have climate change right now, and we need to address it, and we need to do something about it. And these certain select group of congressmen keep on blocking any efforts to really, really push forward legislation that will, invest in renewable energy and really try to combat the effects of climate change. So we need to really push these certain leaders, to change their policies, change their minds on this, because we need to get something done, or else we're already seeing, there's news just the other day about how a huge major sheet of ice in Antarctica is melting and rising sea levels are happening right now. And if we don't do something about this, we're going to see cities like New York underwater in a few decades.
Well, we want to say that Washington is taking somewhat of a stance to speak against this, or speak about it, I should say. The White House has spoken, and John P. Holdren is President Obama's science advisor who spoke recently about climate change, and he had this comment to say, and we'll play it right now.
And the contents confirm that climate change is not a distant threat. It is affecting the American people already. On the whole, summers are longer and hotter, with longer periods of extended heat. Wildfires start earlier in the spring and continue later into the fall. Rain comes down in heavier downpours. People are experiencing changes in the length and severity of seasonal allergies, and climate disruptions to water resources and agriculture have been increasing. Across the country, regions are experiencing climate change in different ways. For instance, communities in the Northeast are affected by heat waves, more extreme precipitation events, and coastal flooding due to sea level rise and storm surge. In the Great Plains, rising temperatures lead to increased demand for water and energy and impacts on agricultural practices. Drought and increased warming in the Southwest foster wildfires and increased competition for scarce water resources for people and for ecosystems. Scientists who study climate change confirm that these phenomena are consistent with the ongoing changes in global climate, which we know with very high confidence are being caused mainly by the increase of atmospheric carbon dioxide and other heat-trapping gases released by human activities.
And there you heard a little from John P. Holdren, who is President Obama's science advisor, speaking about the issue of climate change. Cindy Trinh here with us. And as we were sharing a little bit and hearing a little bit about what he's talking about, he's definitely giving credence to the fact that there is this issue of climate change. I guess the question when we talk about wanting Congress to act, wanting people to act, to do something, what can be done?
I think we need to really educate people on how important this issue is, because in certain parts of America, they probably don't feel the effects as much as, let's say, New Yorkers who felt the effects of Hurricane Sandy. But we need to get New Yorkers, people like New Yorkers, who now know what climate change is doing to our communities, to really rally up and get the congressmen in their local communities. That means people who are elected in our local areas to really address this issue. For example, in Brooklyn, Representative Michael Grimm, who was a huge climate change denier for a long, long time, finally flipped because of pressure that the community put on him to address this issue. And it really happened after Sandy, because like I said, once it affects people's lives personally, they start wanting to come forth and address the issue. So just that's a great example of what we need to do. We need to get representatives in our local communities who are climate change deniers to finally admit that this is the truth, that we can't deny reality anymore. That
well,
this is the
are
world
we
we
finding
live in.
more people, particularly here in the Northeast, becoming more vocal and more of an advocate, considering the fact that we have had the experience of Hurricane Sandy? I think it's unfortunate that we have to wait until we have an experience to become an advocate, but are we finding now that since this, more people are really tilting that way?
Yeah, I think it's also unfortunate that it's always after the fact that we do something about it. But, like, if we had only listened to Al Gore, right? Then, then maybe we could have prevented this. No. But I think definitely in the Northeast, because we did suffer from that huge hurricane, but also in California, they've suffered huge droughts in the last years. And farmers in the Midwest, they're complaining about no rain, just drought season, like all year long, and our crops are dying. So farmers can't make a living. We're not getting the foods that we need because, the farmers can't cultivate on their land because there's no rain and we're suffering from severe drought. So it's really happening all over the country. I think just because of the recent storm in the Northeast, it's so prevalent in people's minds, and we're still suffering the effects from it. We're still recovering from it. So it's still on our minds constantly, but it's definitely happening all over the country. And I think we need to come up with like a universal plan, a universal message to send to Congress to say this needs to be done. We need to invest in renewable energy. And President Obama has a very comprehensive climate change plan that he's addressed many times. It's just these select group of congressmen that continually block his efforts. And we need to get those congressmen to stop blocking the efforts to finally admit that climate change is real, and we can finally then do something about it.
So for the average person who's watching out there who may not be familiar with climate change, when we see these extreme weather patterns, when we see that it's, you know, a little bit hotter in winter than it normally should be, or it's a little bit cooler in the summer than it should be, or, you know, there's just, you know, the winds are blowing at astronomical rates, we're seeing climate change. And so therefore, what should a person do, given the fact that we've seen the elements, we know exactly what it is, what do we do to engage the average person to even make them aware?
I think for average people, there's just always little things that we can do to contribute towards, you know, improving our environment. And that could be as little as using reusable bags at the grocery store. It's just all those little tiny contributions collectively added together will add up to something significant. And so for the average person who notices, like, wow, like the weather is changing, or my land is changing, the climate seems to be different, that will then trigger their desire to want to contribute to this cause. And they could literally do the smallest little things. New York City just implemented the compost program in all of our trash now. All New Yorkers can now put their compostable trash into these bins. And that already in and of itself is so significant, because then when you add up all the New Yorkers all doing this, putting their trash into the compost bins, that then becomes a very big thing, right? Because then we're all collectively doing something together. And I think that's what the message needs to, you know, we need to really deliver that message to people, is that just the tiniest little things, you don't have to be a huge politician, you don't have to be, you know, part of Greenpeace or Sierra or that. Like you can do your little part, exactly. You can do your little part where you are, where you live, and that will be enough.
All right, Cindy Trinh, our guest, thank you so much. For people who want to catch your blog real quickly, where do they go?
You can go on my Tumblr site. It's burnyourstencils.tumblr.com, or my Facebook page is just Burn Your Stencils.
All righty, we want to tell you thank you so much for coming and sharing with us.
Thanks.
All right, I got to take a quick break, but back with more Open when we return.